Welcome to The Critique. Today, we are rapidly diving into a submission from the channel Echo Chamberlain, a transcript titled Progressive White Women Are Ruining Everything, which argues that contemporary feminist cultural dominance has alienated young men and degraded arts and media. Let's jump straight into the first point of feedback.
Yeah, let's get right to it.
So the material connects broad cultural declines directly to a specific demographic without establishing the causal mechanism, which really weakens the logical flow.
Right. This is the most significant structural weakness right out of the gate. The script attributes everything from declining viewership and commercial failures in gaming to the spike of college students identifying as trans solely to the influence of progressive white women. It presents this group as this monolithic cause for what are actually incredibly complex systemic issues. By blaming a single group for things like tech fatigue or movie boredom, the argument just feels reductive and easy for a skeptic to dismiss as mere venting.
Yeah, it makes it easy to write off. So the improvement here is that the author needs to acknowledge other variables like economic factor, corporate greed, or technology, and argue why this specific cultural lens of progressive white women is the dominant factor rather than the only factor.
Exactly. You have to, inoculate the audience against the "it's just capitalism" counter-argument.
Right.
Like, instead of just saying, we tried pronouns and it didn't work, acknowledge that institutional higher-ups pulled the brakes due to financial or legal risks, and then argue that the ideological push came from this specific demographic.
Because HR departments aren't just ideological engines, they're
risk mitigation engines. Exactly.
Yeah.
And we see the same thing when they discuss the failure of inclusive, empathy-based attitudes in gaming. Acknowledge that bad game design is often the culprit, but argue that the prioritization of empathy over gameplay is the specific ideological fault of the target demographic.
It's about distinguishing between incompetence and ideology. And what about that Emerald Fennell critique?
Right, where they just call her work immature edge slop.
Yeah, that feels like a YouTube comment.
It really does. Reframe that. Rather than just saying she produces edge slop, analyze why the specific progressive white woman worldview results in that aesthetic. Perhaps argue that it prioritizes shock value over narrative substance because it lacks genuine struggle.
That turns it from an insult into actual analysis, which actually leads perfectly into our second critique point. The piece oscillates between serious sociological data and ad hominem insults, which completely undermines the authority of the evidence presented.
This was so jarring for me. The author cites robust data from the UK Youth Endowment Fund regarding violence against boys, like 57% experiencing controlling behavior, and the Scandinavia paradox regarding gender differences.
Really high-level stuff.
Very high level. But this analysis is immediately followed by petty descriptions of school speakers having big bombs and faffing for ages with the cable. This tonal whiplash makes the speaker sound like a disgruntled schoolboy rather than a serious cultural critic.
It totally deflates the tension. So the suggestion here is to maintain the intellectual high ground established by the statistics. The critique of the emotional upgrade for men is strong on its own, so it doesn't need physical insults to land. The satire should target the ideas, not the bodies of the people presenting them.
Let's look at a concrete example. Replace the description of the women, Trish and Joan, and their physical appearance with a critique of their methods. Focus on the PowerPoint presentation approach, being fundamentally disconnected from how boys learn, compared to, say, the relational connections of an athlete or a veteran.
That makes it a pedagogical critique.
Right, and when discussing the bland conviviality in male characters, focus on the writing failure, the lack of dry wit or danger, rather than just calling the creators Los Angeles-based screenwriters in their 20s.
That's just a shortcut. Oh, and the part about older women dating younger men in media?
Yes. Keep the observation about the hypocrisy, but frame it as a cultural blind spot, rather than just a complaint about progressive white women not accepting it. It sounds much more objective.
Absolutely. Okay, shifting gears a bit. The argument that men are opting out is compelling, but it needs to better address the counter-arguments regarding male agency to be truly persuasive.
This is a fascinating section. The text argues that male retreat is purely a rational adaptation to a rigged market, where women have low-risk validation via social media and men face high-risk rejection.
And they use that Chris Rock quote about conditional love to support it.
Right, which is effective. But the piece risks painting men entirely as passive victims of a system created by women, ignoring male responsibility in the development of these gender models.
So to strengthen the argument, The author must explicitly address why the old norms that the author claims women want to keep are breaking down from the male side beyond just fear of being labeled creepy.
When discussing the 6'2" handsome man versus the less attractive man, acknowledge that this power dynamic has always existed, but argue that the labeling of the rejection has changed.
Right, from not interested to creepy or harassment.
Exactly. That changes the risk profile, and expand on the porn versus intimacy comparison. Instead of just saying it's low risk, argue that the culture has failed to provide a compelling reason for men to take the risk.
It's a supply and demand issue. What about the statistic that 78% of literary agents are women?
Rather than just saying men opted out of humanities because of ideological conformity, acknowledge that men also left for economic returns elsewhere.
Because the humanities don't pay.
Right. This makes the argument that culture has lost its prestige much more robust. Men didn't just run away, they made an economic calculation.
That's a much stronger stance. Now, for our final point today. The section exploring the contradictions in gender ideology is incredibly dense and risks confusing the listener without clearer signposting.
It really is discombobulated, to use the author's own word. The script jumps rapidly between the idea that women are more emotionally mature, which is an essentialist view, and the gender is socially constructive view required for trans allyship.
Which makes it hard to tell which belief the author holds versus which one he is attacking.
Exactly. While pointing out the hypocrisy is the goal, the execution is messy.
So the improvement is to clearly delineate between the author's view of biology and the critique of the progressive view. Use a steelman approach to describe the progressive view before dismantling it with the Scandinavian evidence.
Structure the argument as a distinct case A versus case B. Explicitly state progressive ideology claims A, that gender is a construct, yet relies on B, innate feminine emotional superiority.
Lay the trap before you spring it.
Right. And when discussing the transitioned person, explicitly contrast it with the inherent femininity argument. Show exactly where the logic breaks down.
Like saying you can't claim femininity as a specialized innate skill set while simultaneously claiming anyone can adopt it by changing pronouns.
Yes, make them collide. And finally, use the Scandinavia example as the clincher for the biological argument, rather than just burying it in the middle of a paragraph.
It needs to be the closing slam dunk.
Absolutely.
All right, to recap our main actionable advice today, move beyond monolithic blame by acknowledging complex causality. Strip away the petty insults to let the shocking statistics stand on their own, and clearly structure the philosophical contradictions regarding gender rather than mixing them together.
And I really encourage the listener to refine that rational retreat argument by giving men more agency in the narrative, rather than just portraying them as victims of girl boss culture.
We invite you to re-edit the script with these lenses and submit the work again for a follow-up. Thanks for joining.